The introduction is, I'm Mary Beth, and I'm a competent woman.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Well, that's how you introduce yourself.
That's how you introduce yourself. And that says a lot about the program, but that to me felt powerful, right? I mean, that really sort of met me where I was. And so that statement is sort of an example of the fundamental focus and ideology of Women for Sobriety, but it was very empowering for me to say that. And so I really appreciated that a lot.
Was Life Ring and She Recovers back then, or did they come about later on?
So Life Ring's parent organization, Secular Organization for Sobriety, which still has around 3 meetings, but Life Ring broke off of SOS in 95, and I found SOS in 94. And so Life Ring's parent organization, which had a similar philosophy to what Life Ring has, they existed.
This is Mind, Body Matters with Greg Rennie.
Welcome to Mind, Body Matters. This is Greg Rennie, and, you know, it's a weird thing doing this show now solo without my buddy Rob Brieford, but just for the listeners to know, Rob's been very, very busy with his voice actor job, and he's been getting a lot of gigs, KFC. I believe he's all over Spotify as well. So, unfortunately, he doesn't have the time. You know, he's a busy, famous guy. Doesn't have the time, but that's okay. I'm going to be going solo with the show, and that's cool with me. So all the best to Rob. And yes, we keep in touch as good friends. So a while ago, I was contacted by a woman by the name of Mary Beth O'Connor. And what an interesting person. What an interesting life she has led. She has a book out now called From Junkie to Judge. And I had a phone call with her. I was fascinated by, which direction we should take in this interview. And she shared with me that she, for a number of years, was addicted to crystal meth. Now, as a therapist, and I'm sure anybody that's listening would know as well, is that crystal meth is extremely addictive, very hard to come off of. But she did. She turned her life around and became a judge, and now she's an author. And her new book is called From Junkie to Judge. So, here's my interview with Mary Beth O'Connor. Mary Beth, thanks very much for coming in the studio today.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
We had a chat a little while ago, actually a long time ago. This has been a long time in coming, but once we get over Christmas and all that, then we have more time for these things. But back then we were talking about a book. Now I don't know whether the book's been out for a while or is it fairly new.
Yeah, it's actually been out for 2 years. Yeah, it's, my memoirs From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction, all those words chosen very carefully, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Oh, yeah,
It's just hit its 2-year anniversary of being out.
One thing that stood out when we talked last time is that you are 31 years in recovery from drug addiction.
Yes, I had 31 years in January.
But what was some of your first support groups that you had when you first got into recovery?
Well, when I went to rehab, they actually, and this is in 93, they actually told me that 12 steps, which is, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, all the Anonymouses are 12 steps. They told me that's all there was. Like, they were really adamant. Like, there is nothing else. And so
back then, yeah, for sure.
Well, no, actually, no. That's what they said. And so
that's what they said, yeah.
That's what they said. And so at first I believed them. And I did read all of the AA Big Book and all of the NA texts, and I went to 12-step meetings. Wasn't the best fit for me, which I told them over and over, but I tried to pull out the parts I could use. And I did find some helpful ideas. But then when I got home from rehab, and now it's January of 94, and for the younger listeners, I'll emphasize there is no Google. Okay. There's no Google in January
no,
of 94.
There wasn't. No.
But I started thinking, is it really true that there's no other option? So I got my car and I went to the library.
Good for you. Yeah.
And it turned out it wasn't true, not even in 1994. And so I found Women for Sobriety, which still exists today. I found the parent organization for what's today Smart Recovery. And I found the parent organization for what today is Life Ring Secular Recovery. So I really combined ideas from all of those programs and did what today we would call build an individualized recovery plan, which no one I knew did it then at that time, I didn't know anyone else who did it that way. But today, I definitely know more people that are taking that tactic. It's actually recommended by the experts that all recovery plans should sort of be individually tailored. And so that's
yeah.
how I did it.
Yeah.
I synthesized.
The book, Junkie to Judge, you said that you use the words carefully. Let's talk about the time where you had a very, very strong addiction to crystal meth. I have no idea. This is what I'm curious about. I have no idea on how you went from living in that kind of culture, using crystal meth, to a career as a judge. So let's rewind a bit. Tell me about your childhood and what you felt was kind of behind the addiction.
Yeah. So there were multiple problematic areas of my childhood. I was actually left at a nunnery for the first 6 months of my life. Didn't live with my family. I'm sure they, changed me and fed me, but there was a disruption, an attachment disruption right away. And then when I did live with my mother and the man who became my sister's dad, who adopted me, who was a nice man, she wasn't focused on me. She could be violent at times. She wasn't really interested in being a mom. But when I was 9, things took a much worse turn because she married my stepfather. And my stepfather was very violent with her. He was physically, sexually violent with me. A lot of shouting, a lot of stress and strain, never knowing what you're walking into, never knowing what little thing you might do that might set him off. And so it was just a really high stress environment. And
inconsistent, right? You didn't know what was happening the next minute, right? Yeah.
That's right. I mean, I could do the same thing 10 times, and 9 times it would go under the radar, and the 10th time it would be like the worst thing anybody ever did.
Right.
And I did try. I mean, when we first moved in with him, I just thought, oh, he's got like different rules, crazy rules sometimes, but let me try to accommodate these new rules. Like, he had a weird thing about not going barefoot in the house, which was odd to me because in New Jersey in the summer, we were barefoot, most of the time. Okay, I can adjust. But then I realized, no, that wasn't it at all. It didn't matter. The rules were inconsistent. The reactions were inconsistent. You could do next to nothing and trigger him. And so I actually did things like tried to develop strategies to reduce the risk. Like, we had a chore of putting dishes away from the dishwasher when we got home from school. And so I was 9 and my sister was 7. And I taught her that when we put the dishes away, we should do it one dish at a time. So it didn't clack. So it didn't make noise. And so that was sort of the stress and strain, but also my 9-year-old efforts to do what I could to reduce the risk.
And yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, I'm a psychotherapist, so I find very often that people with a life of addiction come from, well, I don't know, I think dysfunction is an overused word, but an environment, a family environment where it was inconsistent, as I mentioned. You're not quite sure what's happening. You're flexing to the adults in the house and their behavior. So from 9 on, what do you think developed in you personally where later on the solution of a drug came into play? Do you recall what it was like?
I mean, I was definitely struggling with both depression and anxiety. I'd actually struggled with anxiety before that. I mean, I remember my earliest memories when I was around 4, and I had a lot of soothing techniques. Like, I had some counting techniques, and I would do little finger games, talking to each other, making them characters to try to go to sleep at night. So I already felt stressed, and I already knew my mother sort of wasn't really interested or there to help me. And so when I moved into an environment where there was actual vast increase in threat, and I already knew I was alone, that just exacerbated the anxiety that I was already struggling with. And so that was a lot of it. And the other thing I'll say is there's a reason why the drugs are attractive, right? In the beginning, they seem to work.
They work. Yeah.
They work in the beginning. Yeah. And so that's part of it. It's that when I had my first drug, which was alcohol, and it was Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill wine, which is like a common introductory drug in America.
Isn't it interesting when you have, like, for people that have addiction, their first drink or their first high, they can describe in detail.
That's right.
And there you go. You described exactly the type of alcohol. Wow.
Yeah, that sweet, overly sweet, cheap alcohol, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But what captured my attention was how much better I felt. I mean,
Hmm.
that's why you pursue it. I felt like my muscles loosened up. I felt like I could take a deeper breath. Like I was laughing and giggling with my girlfriend, sort of like a more openly joyful way, and that really captured my attention. Like, this is the best I felt in my memory. I need to have more of this, and that's how it starts for a lot of us. It seems to help initially.
Yeah. And as I talk to clients that, this has become a solution for something. And I mean, anything that would happen at a young age where you would feel less socially conscious, self-conscious, confidence, like laughing with your friends. I mean, yeah, the unfortunate thing, it does work. Now, how did you transition later on from alcohol to drugs? So I guess alcohol wasn't necessarily your drug of choice, or was it at the time, or what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, first, I'm sure we both know alcohol is a drug, right? Alcohol is a drug. And
Absolutely.
and when I
Absolutely.
talk in general and I'll talk about drugs, this or that, I always mean including alcohol. But on the specific side, in my experience, so alcohol, I pursued alcohol right away. I mean, I was looking for opportunities to drink, making them. I would steal beer from my dangerous stepfather because that's how much I wanted the alcohol.
Wow.
But I also quickly added in weed. There were pills around, mostly downers, but some stimulants. And I did a lot of acid my sophomore year of high school. But when I was 16, I found meth, and I was shooting meth within 6 months at 17 years old.
Really? Oh.
Yes. And as you say, though, immediately it was my drug of choice after the first time. Somehow
Right.
it was just biochemically. I mean, I had abused alcohol. I had abused everything I did, but the meth biochemically just fit me best.
What did it do differently for you?
I mean, meth releases the most dopamine of all of the drugs, right? It's a
Yeah.
very extreme dopamine hit. So it's just that rush of euphoria and energy. And I was, and you feel just like the world is. I mean, I remember literally after the first snort looking up and the room looked brighter, like the whole world looked brighter, and there's that positive. But also, it's got a very strong numbing effect because not only are you putting the drug in your system, but you're staying up for days. And that
Mm.
really, you go from this like euphoric high to a deep crash. And I actually like the crash
Really?
because when I crashed and fell asleep, I didn't toss and turn. If I had nightmares, I didn't remember them. So it was sort of like an immersive black deep sleep that I wasn't used to. I struggled always to get to sleep, to stay asleep. I was always sort of listening, for any movement in the house. And when I crashed on meth, I was just out like a light. And I just eventually woke up and I could remember anything that had happened during that sleep. So it was the up. It was the high, it was the euphoria, it was the dopamine. It was staying up for days, and it helped numb, push my pain deeper and deeper away. But it also allowed me to sort of black out and crash in a way that I actually appreciated.
At the time, were you concerned about needles? I mean, I'm not sure if you're sharing needles, but just the concern about additional health problems with intravenous use?
I mean, this was a little bit before HIV, but we knew that you could get bloodborne diseases from it. You can get, we knew Hep C and other diseases. So I would share needles if I had no choice, but I would try not to. But I definitely did share needles, and I got lucky that I never got any bloodborne diseases. And also, in the last few years before I got sober, there was a needle exchange in San Francisco that I used. So I was able to get fresh needles that way. But for me, the first time that I shot meth, I was excited. Like, I was really excited. I had seen people do it. And to me, it was sort of like a next step in my drug evolution. It was always, what's the next more intense thing? And so when somebody offered to shoot me up for the first time, I was overjoyed. I mean, I'd
Hmm.
like to say I
No
thought
fear?
twice. No fear.
Really? Oh.
No fear.
And you didn't snort or use it differently prior to that?
Oh yeah, I did. I mean,
Oh, you did? Okay.
yeah. No, I snorted for about 6 months before I shot up the first time. Yeah. But once I shot up, then I was really committed to that. Although later I went through a snorting phase again for a few years in my early 30s, or mostly. But I shot again the last 5 or 6 years before I got sober at 32. So most of the time I was shooting it.
In addition to the health risks, I'm sure you were in a community and amongst people where it was quite dangerous. Was that a deterrent at all, or did you care that you were around a group of people that could be risky being involved with them?
I mean, so a lot of the people weren't risky, but some were. So let me do the not risky people first. I mean, I grew up in a small town in New Jersey. So most of the drug dealers are people that you know.
Yeah.
They're people in town. They're guys in town, or they're a guy from the next town who's like the higher end dealer who deals to the local guys in your town. So a lot of it's more communal, I think, than we realize, right? I mean, a lot of drug purchases are among friends. Somebody goes out and gets a gram or an eighth, and then we split it, or it's like that. But I did put myself in some dangerous situations for drugs. I mean, I definitely went with people who I didn't really know. I would get into a car with somebody I barely knew, go to the house of somebody I barely knew. So I remember I was hitchhiking one time to go to a drug dealer's house, and my chemistry teacher picked me up. I was like in high school, and he was yelling at me about the dangers of hitchhiking. And, but to me, it was just, but I had to, because I had to get to the drug dealer's house, so others expressed more concern than I felt. But there was some danger, but a lot of the drug use community is really sort of a community, right? And it's people that you hang around with and may have known for 10 years beforehand.
Chemistry teacher. I'm sure. I'm sure that hasn't got past you, or I'm sure in other radio interviews they don't pick up on that. That. Gee, it kind of sounds a little familiar. Sounds like Breaking Bad. He was a chemistry teacher, right? Yeah.
He was, yeah. He was really mad at me, too. He yelled at me, yeah.
Oh, wow. But he didn't cook meth, right?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge, yeah.
He shared with you his concerns, and I guess that didn't deter you.
No. And I'll say this, some other drug users were concerned about me too. Like so there's this sort of the general drug world in my town, starting with, pot and others drugs, right? And of the general drug world, a certain percentage would use meth sometimes, but then there was the group of us that used it more regularly. So now we're getting to a smaller and smaller and smaller escalated group. And even with the group who used regularly, I was considered to be extreme. And other people in that group would tell me, Mary Beth, you need to go home and go to bed. Mary Beth, you've been up too long. Mary Beth, you need to take a break. And so I definitely was at sort of the top end of the hierarchy as far as extreme drug use in my town.
How many years were you using meth before you got to the point where you found recovery and you decided, and I'd like to know why, that you went into recovery, but how many years?
So I was using drugs 20, because I used from 12 to 32, and probably 3/4 of that time I was using meth. And so it was a long time.
So share with us more about what the drug did for you, and then later on what the drug did to you that encouraged you to quit. I mean,
it did for me really the things I think I already talked about, which is primarily it put me in that it allowed my pain to be more distant. So I just didn't care as much, or it didn't come to the, but I'll say this, the thing about suppressing emotions, negative emotions or painful emotions, is that you suppress all emotion, right? And so I was numbed out as to everything. And also drugs, because say like with meth, it gives you so much dopamine, your body stops making its own dopamine because you're already flooding it with dopamine from the drugs. And so I had no sort of natural happiness or joy. And the only emotions I usually really felt would be rage occasionally, or frustration, or fear, right? Those were sort of the only 3 emotions that I was aware of feeling. And that was related to the drug use, pushing it down, but also the brain process that goes along with it. And as far as sort of what happened over the last 10 years, so I graduated Berkeley from college when I was 22, and I didn't get sober till 32. And during those 10 years, I didn't work my way up the corporate ladder. My terminology is I worked my way down the corporate ladder. Because I couldn't hold a job because I couldn't get there, on top of which at 32, I was having some physical problems from the meth. I was really feeling hopeless and trapped and miserable. And my partner was ready to throw me out. So it was just sort of like everything all together that made me say, finally, maybe I ought to go to rehab. I mean, I know in the movies, it's like this epiphany moment from one thing.
Yeah. They call it a moment of clarity or something like that. But it wasn't for you.
No, and I think that happens. So like a DUI might shake somebody up or they get, arrested or they lose custody of their kids. But most of the time, the people that I know, it's usually a cumulative sort of wearing down, and that's how it was for me.
Then as it sounds like you went to rehab. Tell me a bit about how that came about and what type of rehab did you choose?
Yeah. So I had no job, no insurance, and no money. And even today, that's a problem. It's hard to get treatment if you don't. I mean, I think in the American, when we talk about drug policy, we act like everybody has access to treatment on demand, and it absolutely is not true. It's not true.
Same here in Canada. It's absolutely not true.
It's not true. So it took me a while to actually find a place that would take me that I could afford. The one advantage I had is in California, drug treatment counts as a disability. So if you paid into the system, you can actually get a little bit of money for it. And that's how I did it. And I was in a longer term program. It was a women's program, 90 days minimum. Yes. Cause I mean, these 28 or 30 days things,
No, I've worked in them and I don't have any faith in them. Definitely 90 days or longer. Where was this center?
It was in the Bay Area too. It was about 25 miles from my house. And it was full inpatient, all women. And it was a 90-day minimum stay, but I stayed for 5 months. So I was there for quite a while.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. That's, I think, once you take the person off of their drug of choice, that's where the work begins, eh? So you had an opportunity to work on yourself. What was the big revelation or perhaps not revelation, insight into yourself that helped you stay sober when you were in that rehab for that period of time? What was going on?
Well, I will say that I was not perfectly abstinent from day one. Most people can't be perfectly abstinent. I mean, I use the word can't be because I really think that's what it is. They can't do it yet, right? I mean, your brain is screaming, you need drugs. You don't have sort of the skill set as to how to handle the scenarios, but also your emotions are coming up for the first time and you don't know how to handle them either. So it's really difficult. Most people are not capable of perfect abstinence from day one. And for me, I used 3 times in the first 5 months and come on, that was way better. That was a vast improvement.
There's some harm reduction there. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I will point out that if I could have used 3 times in 5 months on a regular basis, I wouldn't have been in rehab. It was a lot better. But I don't even view it as fail, succeed. I know that's how some programs look at it, but I don't look at it that way. I look at it as it was just part of my evolution to get, the skills that I needed and really sort of the hope that recovery was possible for me, because when I went to rehab, I didn't really think I could get sober. I thought maybe I can figure out how to do better. That was sort of as far as my imagination went. And so I view it as just sort of getting to the place where I was able to start the clock on what's now 31 years. So it took a while.
We talked earlier about, and on the phone as well, about 12-step groups. So was this treatment center 12-step based, or was that where you were kind of given, hey, go to meetings, get a sponsor, 90 meetings in 90 days, all these things that AA presents? Is that what they presented to you at the time?
They didn't. Yes, they presented it as the one and only way. Like
The one and only way, yeah.
They were really adamant and vehement. When I kept telling them it's not a good fit for me for this reason, for that reason, for the other reason, they said you're going to fail. I mean, they told me over and over, you're going to fail if you don't do what we tell you. You're going to fail. And so that was a shock to me because I didn't know that it was going to be only 12 steps. I thought it was a medical treatment facility, like for everybody,
Right,
but it really kind of wasn't. And so that was a surprise. And it was right away, like on day one, I found this out. And but as I said, I had tried to find other treatment programs and couldn't. So I felt like, well, I've got to stick it out, right? I've got to try to find a way. And so I just decided that, I would look for the parts of what they were teaching me and the parts of 12 steps that I thought were helpful to me. And I would just ignore everything else. And that's what I did. I mean, I took seriously listening. I mean, because I read all of the AA Big Book. I read all of the NA texts. I did all the homework they told me to do in rehab. I, participated fully. And but I always viewed everything I was learning as sort of for my consideration, or as a suggestion. But I mean, even though 12 steps isn't right for me, and by the way, I support 12 steps when it's a good fit, but it's not a good fit for a lot of people. But even if I was at a 12-step meeting during the cigarette break, if somebody said something that sounded useful, I tried to, pay attention and take note of it. So I didn't shut my ears off because it wasn't the right fit. I tried to see which parts of it in the program, and also just which parts of the people that have succeeded ahead of me, what techniques and strategies and ideas they had that might be useful for me. And that's sort of how I started.
For many, they kind of pick and choose, take what is beneficial for them. A lot of them find that the fellowship of AA, the connection, did you find as one of the things that you valued in that, or did you connect with them at all? Or
it was mixed. I mean, I will say that's true for all the peer support groups, right? Like that benefit exists in other options besides 12 steps. So, I mean, one of the things it was hard for me to find other people in 12 steps I felt comfortable with, because they too were telling me I was doing it wrong, that I was going to fail because I wasn't following the program. But one of the things I did get from 12 steps that was really important was examples of success. And so, in a 12-step meeting, and this isn't true for a lot of the other peer support options, but their most common format is there's like a speaker telling their story, for 20 or minutes or half an hour of the hour, and then other people share. And so for me, I went into rehab not actually believing sobriety was an option. I just thought, let's try to improve. But now I'm hearing people tell their story. And some of those stories are very similar to my story. A lot of the women also had, sexual assault histories and child abuse histories. And a lot of people did do drugs at my level, even if it was sometimes meth, sometimes other drugs. And now, I'm looking at them and they're a year sober, 2 years sober, and they've like got a job and they're looking healthy. And, and so it did help me to have those examples of success to start to get me to feel more like, maybe this is on the table for me. Maybe I really can recover. And I think that kind of hope can be really important in early recovery, because early recovery is hard work. It's hard to work hard for something you don't think is even an option on the table.
At the time, what other alternatives were there at the time, and what did you discover later on?
Yeah. So the first group I went to, other than 12 steps, that I found was Women for Sobriety. Also, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I was lucky that all the groups I found, they all had local meetings, and that wouldn't be true everywhere. Although today, all of the programs, including 12 steps, have online meetings. So, you always have access today. But I first found Women for Sobriety. And one of the things that I really liked about Women for Sobriety was the focus, what they call is to become the 4C woman. I'm a capable, caring, competent, and compassionate, 4C. And the introduction in WFS, in 12 steps, you're taught to introduce yourself. I'm Mary Beth, and I'm an addict. And in the beginning, I found that really helpful, because I thought I sort of needed to pound it in my brain. But by the time I got home from rehab, I wasn't comfortable with it anymore. I felt like I was saying it like it was the essence of who I am and who I was even then. And it wasn't. Yeah. And in Women for Sobriety, the introduction is, I'm Mary Beth, and I'm a competent woman.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Well, that's how you introduce yourself.
That's how you
Oh,
introduce yourself. And that says a lot
oh.
about the program, but that to me felt powerful, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that really sort of met me where I was. And so that statement is sort of an example of the fundamental focus and ideology of Women for Sobriety, but it was very empowering for me to say that. And so I really appreciated that a lot.
And was Life Ring and She Recovers back then, or did they come about later on?
So, Life Ring's parent organization, Secular Organization for Sobriety, which still has around 3 meetings, but Life Ring broke off of SOS in 95, and I found SOS in 94. And so, Life Ring's parent organization, which had a similar philosophy to what Life Ring has, they existed. And I participated in SOS meetings, and I participated in Rational Recovery, which is the parent to SMART. And a lot of what Life Ring focuses on is the self-empowerment idea as well. Like what we teach is that your success is primarily, never exclusively, but primarily based on your motivation and your efforts. And we also teach that you are actually not powerless. What you really need to do is to fight for your recovery, right?
A lot of people struggle with that in AA because that's part of the AA thing. You're powerless over alcohol, over drugs. Yeah.
Yes. And I didn't agree with that step. And that's step 1, right? I already didn't agree.
Yeah.
But I will say that I thought about it, and because I was trying to find a way to make 12 steps work, and what I decided I could agree is that I am powerless to moderate. Like that's where I landed on that one.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but Life Ring focuses on the individual recovery plan, personal recovery plan, which is what I did, because people are in different places. They have different, beliefs, different learning styles, different goals. And so we focus on helping our members build a plan that's right for them. And then She Recovers is newer. She Recovers has been around about 15 years, I think. I'd have to go look at the exact date. And She Recovers is not just for substance recovery. It's also for mental health recovery, trauma recovery, other behavioral disorders like eating or gambling. It's for overwork, perfectionism, grief. It's everything together, because almost all of the women with a substance used to sort of have one or more of those other things to work on. And so in She Recovers, you could talk about the interplay. Like somebody in She Recovers might say, I'm doing really well with my alcohol, but now my food's starting to get out of control, or now my trauma I'm being triggered, trauma triggered, or whatever it might be. So you can talk about the interplay of the recoveries.
So rehab and support groups, peer support groups, where did your life go from there? Like, I'm sure you had jobs before you studied law. So maybe share what kind of work you did before then.
Well, and I will first also say that for me, I also had to do trauma recovery, right? Like when I got home from rehab, I found a therapist with trauma expertise who had a little bit of addiction knowledge, because I always knew that about the violence. And I had not just violence in the house. I had outside sexual assaults. I had a horrible 6-hour kidnapping or rape by 3 men. I mean, I had a lot of violence. And I always knew that was underneath my drug use. And so when I got home, I did find a therapist with that type of expertise. And I'll also say, it took a lot longer for me to get stable from my PTSD, which I didn't even know I had, which mostly showed up for me as very, very severe anxiety. That recovery was a lot longer of a process. I mean, I was really not struggling with substances after about 2.5 years. I was in individual therapy and meds for a while, and then group therapy in total for 9 years. And even at the end of 9 years, I would say I was 80% recovered. And today I would consider myself 92 to 95%, depending on the day.
Depending on the day, yeah.
Depending on the day. So it was important. And it's true for many of us in sobriety recovery that we also have to work on our trauma and or mental health or other type of recoveries at the same time. I knew even if I could have stayed sober without doing it, which I doubt, I knew I could never be happy, or productive if I didn't deal with the trauma pain. There was no way that I was going to be able to live my best life if I didn't address it.
Early in my career, Gabor Mate came out with his first book, The Realm of Hungry Ghosts, talking about the correlation of trauma and addiction. And at the time, we doubted it, and now I don't doubt it. I see it as a pretty well a given that there's some type of trauma, if not PTSD, in the person's life. But you're a good person to ask. What is the connection between a past of trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and the use of drugs? What is that recovery that you went through regarding trauma, which sounds like crystal meth and the other drugs were a solution to something a little bit deeper. So where is that connection between the two?
Yeah, I mean, it was a solution in the beginning, right? But then the drugs became their own problem on top of the problems I already had, right?
True.
But so for me, the trauma pain was, what led me to the drugs. And then when I got sober, I had to really address what was underneath. But I actually tried to do therapy when I was still using a couple of times, but I could never make any progress because the drugs were like a barrier between me and myself, But in therapy, I was on anti-anxiety meds for a couple of years, and they did help. And then I was able to wean off. I did versions of CBT, and mostly, and then other types, some hypnosis type stuff. There was no EMDR or anything when I was in, therapy. I was in therapy from like 94 to 2003 approximately. And then I also say after 3 years of individual therapy, my therapist put me in a group therapy situation of women with trauma histories. And that was a friggin' eye opener for me. It was like a whole new level of healing, And so, because they were further along in the trauma recovery process than I was, and they were connecting their current reactions and their current behaviors back to their trauma in ways I hadn't yet made the connection. And so it was really a new level of understanding and healing for me. And I was in group therapy for 6 years once I started it. So it was an interesting path. And I don't want to scare anybody who has that kind of trauma to say, 9 years. It's not 9 years in a light switch, right? It's better as time goes by. It's just that it can be a slow process. That the trauma was older and more complicated than my substance use. I mean, that's the reality of it.
Yeah, and usually is, yeah. What was the transition from there into employment and the interest in law?
So when I got sober, I had a Berkeley degree and actually good grades and an embarrassing resume. It's like, an embarrassing resume. Okay. It was a mess. And my last job before rehab, I did word processing for 9 months and then I got fired from that. I mean, I just could not hold even the simplest of jobs. And, so when I got home from rehab and I was 32 and I really had wasted my education. I had wasted, the last 10 years and I felt sort of my age on me. And there's this, I think a lot of us, we feel this need to catch up and make up for lost time, and I wanted to leap ahead. But the truth was nobody was going to hire me for a career job and I wasn't ready for a career job. And I had to suck it up and just admit that to myself and be realistic about what I could handle and what I could get. And so my first job when I got home from rehab was a part-time, temporary, low-level administrative job. Because for me to get up and go to work on time, okay, and stay all the hours I was supposed to be there and do a good job and do it like tomorrow and the day after and the day after. I hadn't been disciplined like that in over 10 years. And so I sort of needed to get the practice of it to get it to sort of be my new sort of habit. And then I worked my way. My second job was a full-time, permanent, mid-level administrative job. And then my third job was a supervisory job at a larger company, and I got a promotion. And then at 6.5 years sober, I went to Berkeley Law School. So that's how long it took for me to be
law,
ready.
Though? I mean, yeah, why the decision to go into law at that time?
Well, when I was young, and I was my one sort of special place, my one place of solace and of being seen and valued was school. Like I had always done well academically and I got a lot of positive attention from teachers. But also I was always very verbal and analytical and I could beat, grown-ups in an argument. You want to talk politics, you want to talk social, whatever. I mean, I was very good at that. And so I had been told since I was a fairly young girl that I would make a good lawyer. Even though I was the first person in my immediate family to go to college, so it's not like that was there, but that was in my mind. And I had actually gone to law school right after I graduated from college, like immediately, but I was using meth at such a high level that I couldn't handle it. I couldn't get there. I couldn't get there to even try to do the work. So I had given back a top 10 law school because of my addiction right after college. So it was this huge, like painful loss, that I had something like that in my hands, and I knew I lost it because of my meth use. So that was sort of in the back of my mind, but I was also in sobriety afraid of trying again. Really, what if I fail again? What if I get rejected? So it was scary. So it wasn't until 6.5 years sober that I felt ready, to take the risk and to apply. And so that's when I did it. That was sort of the pathway to actually really go into law school when I was 39 years old.
Did you find it difficult going back to school at that age? Was it challenging? Or sometimes for some people, we do better by going back at a later age?
It was challenging because, that was 16 years later from when I went the first time. And so I hadn't taken a test in 16 years, but my life was in a much calmer place. My partner and I, by 6.5 years sober, we had stabilized our relationship and we were doing well. And I was disciplined again. I had, been working a job and handling deadlines and juggling multiple projects and all of that. And that discipline helped when I was in law school. So it was challenging, but in some ways it was easier than it was for some of the younger people who still had a lot more chaos in their life.
And what type of law did you go into?
So when I got out of Berkeley Law, I lived in the Bay Area. I lived in Silicon Valley in California, and I worked I worked at a big law firm that did, complex business, Silicon Valley, big company cases. And then I did that for 4 years. And then I went and I did class action work for the federal government. And then at 20 years sober, I became a federal administrative law judge. And then I took early retirement in 2020. And now I do a lot of other things that I'm happy to talk about. But that was a professional trajectory, was just getting used to working my way up sort of into middle management. And then at 39, I went to law school and started my legal career, which I did for about almost 20 years. Yeah.
And your work as a judge, did you see people coming into the courtroom that had the same background you had with addiction, and how did you feel about them? Because a lot of judges don't have a lot of information, and I'm sure they see the worst of the worst. So there's a certain amount of labeling and stigma. How did you address it?
Yeah, I didn't do criminal cases, although
Okay.
You are right that there's a wide variety in judges' understanding of substance use. And I actually do trainings for judges now and lawyers. I do substance trainings, and I've talked to a number of drug courts about my personal story and about, pointing out what would be an evidence-based approach versus what's not an evidence-based approach, and those kind of things. But I did do cases that involved people with my history. So I did mostly disability cases. And so a lot of them either had an active substance use disorder, which of course is a modern name for addiction, or they had one in their past. And a lot of them had trauma histories and mental health challenges, and they were sort of trapped. So I saw a lot of people with similar backgrounds to mine.
And over the last number of years, as you mentioned, I think you said in 2020, then you started doing other things. Was that work that you did led to writing a memoir, or what was the motivation there?
Yeah. So when I was appointed a judge, it was sort of like a time of reflection. Like, how the heck did I go from shooting meth at 17 and for many, many years, right, to a federal judge? And so that's when I started thinking about, could my story be of use? Is my story unusual enough to be useful? And I hadn't actually read a lot of recovery memoirs, so I started reading some. And I noticed a couple things. And one was that they were pretty much all 12-step memoirs. And don't get me wrong, my techniques work for 12-step people too, but I thought there wasn't really an example of doing it a different way or building an individualized plan. Plus, a lot of the memoirs, they don't really show where the drug use came from. Like, they don't show what preceded it. And so I wanted to include that. And then 30% of my memoir is my first 3 years of recovery, because a lot of memoirs at the end, it's sort of like, I went to a couple meetings and everything was great. It's like, well, that's not how recovery works, you know?
Yeah.
And I also wanted to show him the interplay of the trauma recovery and the substance recovery. So I didn't want to write a book that was already out there 42 times, but I thought this is the book I'd like to write, and I don't see it out there. And maybe it can be useful, and maybe it'll add something to sort of the genre. And so that's why I spent the time. And I will also say it was intellectually stimulating to try to figure out how to write a good memoir, because it turns out that writing a good legal brief and writing a good memoir are two different skill sets.
Yeah, imagine so. So the book, Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction, what's the feedback from people since you've had the book out?
I mean, a lot of people are, they do view it as a source of sort of reassurance, you know, that recovery is possible. I get a lot of questions from friends and families, and that's why I emphasize things like I shot meth, right? That's considered to be at sort of the far end of the drug use spectrum, and yet I got sober and maintained it. Also, that I was 32 when I got sober. It wasn't like I used for 5 years, you know, so you can use for 20 years or longer and still eventually get sober. That's a reassurance. And then a lot of people are, they do like that I offer another example or different strategies and techniques, a more self-empowered approach description in how to get recovery. So it's a lot of those things. Although I will say not everybody's happy with me, because, you know, like I had a Wall Street Journal op-ed where I talked about being a former judge and a former meth addict, and I got sober without a higher power, and people were not happy about that at all.
Because you weren't connecting with the AA piece that they were upset, or I'm not quite sure why they were upset.
That was part of it, but also the fact that somebody who shot meth even could become a judge, like they were really not happy about that.
They felt you shouldn't have got there in the first place. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes, which is interesting because, again, I had 20 years sober. At 20 years sober, my odds of developing a problem again were almost the same as the general population, right? I mean, I'm basically almost back at even with everybody else. And so that's odd to me. But yeah, there were a lot of people that were not happy with that combination. Shot meth, became a judge.
Judges are human too, and I'm sure, you know, maybe not all have shot meth, but I'm sure have had challenges along the way that people may judge like that and have a point of view that they shouldn't have become a judge. But wow, I'm surprised that was some of the feedback. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, but I will say also, it's cleaner for me in the sense that I've never used drugs as a lawyer or a judge, right? I was already long-term sober, and so that makes it easier for me to talk about this. It would have been a little more complicated had I had overlap between drug use and my legal career. But it's also why now that I'm retired, I can actually talk in a more open way now, because I don't have to worry about professional consequences anymore. I don't have to worry about what anybody thinks, really. I can share my story, and I use that judge title today as just sort of an ear opener, right? It's a tool. Yep. It's a tool. People
it catches people's attention.
It catches their attention. It's got a certain positive social resonance. And so I use it as sort of getting the ears open so I can share information I think is useful, you know, and also hopefully reduce stigma and be a reassurance about recovery and all of those things. So that's how I look at it. So I do a lot of speaking. I do a lot of like opinion piece writing in addition to the book. And I do trainings. I do trainings as well. And so my goal is always just primarily to educate and to, you know, offer reassurance.
Tell us about the trainings and how people can access them. What are they about?
Yeah, so I have a number depending on the target audience, right? So I have a continuing legal ed trainings for lawyers and judges because they have like CLE requirements about substance use. I talk sometimes to like mental health organizations like the National Alliance of Mental Illness or others about substance use disorder and the interplay with other mental health conditions. I've got workshops on like peer support options that goes into a lot more detail than what we talked about different support groups. I've done a lot of keynotes for like fundraisers for recovery organizations. And there are others. Those are the ones like, and I have one targeted towards like humanists and atheists and free agnostics and free thinkers to talk about how do you recover without a higher power. And so those are just some of the examples. And people can always message me to my website, which is junkietoJudge.com, if any of that interests them or they have any speaking opportunities. It's sort of this is my retirement part life, right, is to be of use, but also to keep it part-time. Okay, keep it part-time.
Yeah.
But at the same time be useful. So this is sort of it's a really nice place to be where I can do things I wasn't able to do when I was working.
Yeah, what a trajectory. I'm just so impressed. What do you hope to provide people in this conversation? If people are listening that are in early recovery, what do you hope that they get out of what we talked about today or your book? What is a sense of hope that you can convey for them?
I mean, one thing is to sort of emphasize I had physical, sexual, emotional, verbal child abuse. I had multiple sexual assaults. I had a violent boyfriend. I had a very lengthy, drug history, including lengthy IV meth history. And yet I got sober and built a happy and successful life. And so most people, that's sort of on the extreme end of circumstances. And so I hope that's a reassurance. But the other thing is I think it's important for people to know they have peer support options for sobriety, but also to talk about that mental health substance interplay. Because I'll tell you, one thing that frustrates me is sometimes somebody will tell me, like either they or their family member, oh yeah, let's say my son's he's tried everything. He's been to rehab 7 times. But often what that really is he was offered the same thing 7 times. Like there was never an individualized assessment. There was never, he's also being treated for his anxiety, or maybe 12 steps isn't the best fit for him, or maybe, other approach would be better, or maybe he needs medication for his alcohol use disorder or his opiate use disorder. It frustrates me when people get stuck in this loop of being offered only the same thing over and over, and then they feel like they failed. I've tried 7 times. I'm just a failure. I can't do it, when they really need to be tackling it from a different angle.
What occurs to me as a question I'd love to ask you personally is when I've been working over the years in addiction and mental health, there was talk very early on, 20 years ago, about integration. It sounds like you really do see and in trying to inform people that mental health issues are, pretty well a given with someone that has addiction, but treatment, even today, is very silo-based, if you know what I mean. You go and get sober, then you go and you see a trauma therapist. What do you hope to see in American and Canadian healthcare, where we're more integrated with these two, because they are integrated?
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely right that some of the payment systems are siloed. And so you can only go here for your substance use. Yes. On the other hand, there are a lot of treatment facilities that say they're dual diagnosis, but sometimes those words don't have a lot of depth behind them, right? And so one of the things that family members and people struggling often ask me is, how do I tell what's a good treatment facility and what's a not very good treatment facility? And one of the things I say is that they should be evaluating for other mental health conditions on day one. Like if they're going in for substance treatment, right away they should be evaluated. And when they say dual diagnosis, well, what exactly does that mean? Are they getting individual sessions? Are they getting group sessions? Are they being given mental health meds? Some facilities won't do that. Or what exactly do they mean? But even on the substance side, people don't. It's really hard to figure out what's treatment program has good data or good approach. And so one of the things I recommend is that in the U.S., and Canadians can access this, is SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, has an evidence-based toolkit on their website. And so one of the things I recommend to families is read that and then ask questions from that. Do you do this? Do you do that? These things that are evidence-based. Another question I recommend is that they should ask, if I or my family member relapses, what's going to happen? And if the answer is we're going to throw them out, that's the wrong answer. So the answer should be, we're going to sit down and figure out, what we can do to reinforce his plan, his program, work with him and all that. So it's those kind of things that I think can help family members and people struggling understand better, because it's very hard it's very hard to figure out where you should go and what treatment program is actually worth the money or worth the time, or offering something that's truly evidence-based.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly there for sure. I'm sure you're asked quite a lot. What's a good treatment center? I guess the best treatment center for that person. In a lot of ways. So your book, From Junkie to Judge: One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. Where can our listeners find your book?
I mean, it's on Amazon, anywhere in the world you can get it, and all the usual sites, and local bookstores have it or can get it as well. So it's pretty readily available. And
we will add in the episode description the websites that we were talking about, your website as well as the website for Women for Sobriety and the other peer support groups. At the end of each show, I always, I ask the person ahead of time, so I kind of put some thought into it. But I asked you earlier by email what your favorite quote is. And being a big music fan, the song came into my head right away when you said, well, a quote from Tom Petty: "You don't have to live like a refugee." Got to know why that's important to you. What speaks to you in that?
Well, I think about the song, maybe you were kidnapped, tied up, taken away, and held for ransom, right? I mean, right. So there's a lot of indication about maybe you do have this painful past. Maybe you have really been harmed and traumatized, but still, you don't have to live in the ramifications of that. And I think that's an important thing for people to know. There's a way forward, even if you've had the worst of circumstances. It's not going to be easy or fast for many of us, but there is a way out. And that, to me, is what that song stands for. What
comes to mind, I wonder, refugee, is that similar to people that feel that they are the victim? Is there a relation there, or am I off?
Well, I think of it as sort of like when I left my New Jersey, right? When I left New Jersey to go to California for college, I really thought, okay, this is my chance to break out of this misery because I'm leaving home. I'm leaving the abusive people. And that's not really what happened because, I had this kidnapping, which was, I don't want to say it was part of my fault. I could have made a better choice. It doesn't mean I deserved it to happen. I chose a violent boyfriend. I knew he was violent and I moved in with him, which is not uncommon for women with abuse histories. And so it sort of can trail your life, even in the choices you make. And so it's sort of in that way that I think about it, that I was sort of a refugee when I left home with my past on my shoulders like that. And it takes a while to even see it, much less be able to address it.
Okay, that's clearer to me now. Yeah, and it makes sense that quote would be very important for you. Well, Mary Beth, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a great talk.
Be sure to like and follow us on all social media. And if you like what you hear, hit subscribe, download, and share with your friends. Mind Body Matters is a great media production.